Good afternoon. We're now going to open the public briefing for the Calcasieu Parish Long-Term Disaster Recovery Effort. My name is Brian Beam. I am Calcasieu Parish Administrator for the police jury, and we want to welcome everybody today to this important public briefing. There's been a lot of efforts, obviously, in the recovery and response from the two hurricanes, but now we are more formally shifting to what's called long-term recovery, which is self-explanatory, but it involves a very formal process that we're going to be able to shed some light on today. Before we get into that, though, I do want to thank everybody for being here. The recovery effort is hard enough in the short term and long term, but of course we are also in the middle of a global pandemic, and there's a lot of good news on that. We're not going to cover that today, although the governor in his remarks, if he wishes to, might do that, but there's good news on the horizon, so we appreciate that. Let me take a few minutes just to recognize some guests that are here, and then I will have a few comments, and then we'll have some other speakers. So, of course, on the agenda a little bit later, we are certainly grateful to have Governor John Bell Edwards with us today. Brian Abshire, the police jury president for 2021, is with us. We are also appreciative to have Sulphur Mayor Mike Danahay with us in the building. We're here at the Burton Coliseum on the floor. Stephen Dwight, Calcasieu Parish District Attorney, is present today. And we have from the state delegation, Representative Philip Tarver, Senator Ronnie Johns, Senator Mark Abraham, also present, Darrell Baquel, President of McNeese. And I think we have representatives as well from U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy's office and Representative Elizabeth McLaughlin from Representative Clay Higgins' office. We have some folks from FEMA as well and the State Office of Community Development Disaster Recovery, but there's multiple ones of those, so I'm not going to list them all here. The State GOSEP office, General Jim Wascom is here with us. We appreciate that, head of GOSEP. Representatives from DOTD, and we are also appreciative to have Paul Rainwater with Cornerstone, who is helping us greatly with the federal advocacy for the hurricane recovery. So I appreciate everyone being here for this event that is literally involves people at the federal, state, and local level, both public and private. So I just want to make a few comments. I think it will help the public to give a little bit of a summary of what we're talking about when we say long-term recovery. So for those who are not that familiar with that background, we presented this plan a little less formally at our police jury meeting last week, and it comes under what's called the National Disaster Recovery Framework. This framework is a formal federal process. It's been in place since about 2012, and it superseded some earlier efforts, and it's been very refined since then. And basically speaking, when a community has a disaster, hurricanes, fires, floods, this comes into play and it is something to see. And so that process today, the long-term recovery effort under that framework, is what we're talking about. And it recognizes the need for a unified, well-structured approach to long-term disaster recovery that is, 1, community-driven, 2, comprehensive, and 3, transparent, which means we want to communicate with the public, we want to involve the public, and we want to come out with results that help the public. Now, in this case, the general idea, if you go, why do they have this framework? Well, in concept, it's simple. In delivery, it's much more complicated, but basically, it allows us, in this case, Calcasieu Parish, Cameron Parish, any affected parishes, to set our sights on the long-term priorities, not just short-term. We want to accomplish that will allow us to be better prepared for the next disasters. We know they're going to happen. We don't like thinking about it, but each time we need to learn from that, be better prepared for that. And so that is really the ultimate goal with this effort. Now, frankly speaking, this is the tougher part when compared to the early response period after the storms. Now, Calcasieu Parish and our people have been magnificent, in my opinion, in this early response and recovery period, but now we must deal with a larger scope, with issues that are more chronic than acute, issues that will take a lot of money, to be honest. The national framework divides these categories that we're working in into 6 what are called recovery support functions. I'm just going to list them very quickly. 1 is community planning and capacity building. 2, economic well-being, and this is in no particular order, by the way. Number 3, health and social services. Number 4, housing. Number 5, infrastructure. And number 6, natural and cultural resources. This covers a lot of territory and will no doubt involve some rigorous debate. It will involve some important decision-making amongst local governing bodies and also, again, our state and federal partners. But I am exceedingly optimistic about this process. Why? Because the people of our parish and our region are strong people. We are a resilient people. We are not afraid of hard work or self-sacrifice, and I think that's been demonstrated in the last several months in the response and recovery. I'm also optimistic because we are not alone. We don't want to let our own egos get in the way to not have to ask for help. And the good news is there is help. It will come in many forms. You will hear some of this today. Our state agency partners, federal agency partners, not just FEMA, have been helping us for the last couple of months or more, and it's a lot of good news, and we feel very positive about where we're headed. Our local officials and community leaders and organizations will work together with FEMA and these other agencies for a successful recovery. We're also going to need our elected officials, our local parish, city officials, state delegation, to be champions for these outcomes. Again, these are not the easy ones. These are going to be the toughies, but we can do it. And so you can see from those here today that I've announced, and also soon Jim Rock, who I'll introduce later in the program, is going to introduce some other folks that are more community-based. That commitment has been there and will continue to be there from all involved. So thank you for allowing me to give a little background on that. And now we want to hear from some of our speakers. And we will lead off, I would like to ask you to please welcome the Honorable John Bel Edwards, Governor of the state of Louisiana.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Alden. Thank you, Brian. It's great to be over here again in Calcasieu Parish, and just had an opportunity to meet with local officials from Calcasieu and Cameron parishes, and I can tell you Southwest Louisiana is being very well served by all of the folks. At the parish level, the local level, the legislative delegation. By the way, thank you very much, Senator Johns, Senator Abraham, I think Representative Tarver. Thank you all for being here today and for the work that you've been doing. I think Brian summed it up very well. It really does take everybody working together. We're talking about federal partners, so we've got the FEMA Region 6 Administrator, Tony Robinson, here. He's going to be speaking to you a little bit later, but we've had folks on the ground from FEMA since before the storm ever hit, and they haven't left us. You got all the state agencies who are working as well, and then all the nonprofits and others who in the private sector. It takes all of us. So tomorrow marks 5 months since Hurricane Laura hit. And I will tell you, it's been a long 5 months for everybody who was impacted by that hurricane, especially when you realize that they were impacted again just a couple months after that with Hurricane Delta. And then all of the response and recovery efforts have been undertaken during a global pandemic, the likes of which I guess we see about on average every 100 years or so. Very, very challenging environment, and that's why I appreciate so much how good the work is that's being done and how hard people are working. You know, recovery under the very best of circumstances is hard, and it takes a long time. These are not the best of circumstances. And I know that with everything else that was playing out across the country last year and thus far this year with the with the election and the conventions and the pandemic and everything else, people in Southwest Louisiana and elsewhere around the state who have been impacted by hurricanes may be tempted to believe that the country's not paying attention. Well, I will tell you, we're working very hard. We did with the Trump administration, we're doing that with the Biden administration, but also with members of Congress, aided by our congressional delegation, to raise in the consciousness of the people of the country what happened here in Louisiana so that we can get the assistance that we need to make sure that that recovery framework that Brian just talked about is real and meaningful, because it will require a lot of resources. But progress is being made, and we're not going to let up. Every disaster is different, every recovery is different, but they have to be driven by the people who live here if they're going to be successful. That's why this long-term planning process that Brian just mentioned that is now underway is so critically important. You know, our Office of Community Development and GOSEP are working closely with you and all the local officials here on that planning process so that it's your priorities that drive this recovery. FEMA public assistance and individual assistance, along with the Small Business Administration, are important funding sources for helping families and communities to recover from disasters. But for devastating events like Laura and Delta, additional funds are often needed to help a community fully recover. On Friday of this last week, I sent President Biden a letter requesting a supplemental disaster appropriation of about $3 billion in community development block grant funding for disaster recovery to assist the state of Louisiana, particularly Southwest Louisiana, in achieving full recovery. Obviously, these funds can only be made available pursuant to an act of Congress, and it would require this appropriation that we're talking about. But once available, and we're going to work very, very hard to make sure that this happens, but once available, the funding can be used for things like rebuilding people's homes, creating affordable rental housing, hazard mitigation, modernizing infrastructure. You can compensate for agricultural losses, and you can mitigate against future disasters. And we're also trying to make sure that we have the flexibility with this appropriation to use these funds to satisfy non-federal match obligations under the Stafford Act. So you've heard us talk about a 75-25 match, where the state and local governments are responsible for 25% of much of the cost of the disaster. Well, we're trying to get that to 90-10 when we cross a certain threshold, which we believe we will be successful in doing. We're not there yet. But even if we get it down to 10 cents on the dollar, we want to make sure we have the flexibility to satisfy that obligation from the community development block grant funding if that's possible. We're committed to working with all the local officials, the OEPs, and so forth on establishing the priorities for these funds. We've already had some success in asking for additional assistance from the federal government, things that are not automatic but are discretionary. So for example, we requested and received at least 30 days of 100% funding from the federal government for Category A and for Category B. Those are things like non-congregant sheltering, which is critically important during the era of COVID, but also things like debris removal and all of the costs associated with preparing for the storm, things like sandbags and overtime hours and so forth. Now we're working to get that 100% extended from 30 days to 45 days, and we're also working to make sure that each local government can decide for itself which 45-day period to pick. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're going to keep working on it. But we do appreciate the additional assistance that we have received in this regard. For Hurricane Laura, FEMA's put $217 million in the hands of survivors, $151 million for housing assistance, and $65 million for other needs assistance. And the Small Business Administration has approved $584 million in low-interest loans. And our public assistance has obligated another $66 million, and the flood insurance program has paid out more than $41 million on claims. So the assistance that we've received thus far has been substantial. It's just insufficient to do everything that we need to do, and that's why we keep working. For Hurricane Delta, FEMA's put $33 million in the hands of survivors, $24 million for housing assistance and $8 million for other needs. And the Small Business Administration has approved $43 million in low-interest loans. And there have been about $65 million paid out by the National Flood Insurance Program for Hurricane Delta damages. Altogether, more than 67,000 households received DSNAP. That's the Disaster Supplemental Nutrition Program after Hurricanes Laura and Delta. And the total benefits at issue there were $41.5 billion. At the peak of the disaster, there were 18,213 evacuees in shelters, non-congregate shelters for the most part, and they were spread over Texas and Louisiana. That number is now down to 684 people, all of whom are sheltered in Louisiana. We have a hotel in New Orleans and one in Lafayette. And we're working very hard to get these families home. I can tell you case managers have been assigned to each of these families. That happened a long time ago to determine their eligibility for housing assistance and what other assistance can be brought to bear to help these families, because we want them to be able to go home as well. When it comes to infrastructure, installation of temporary buildings and repairs to damaged DOTD facilities is ongoing. There is some good news. Ferry service has resumed in Cameron Parish. Multiple bridges, as you all know, were damaged, but all movable bridges are open for vehicular traffic, and they're functioning with the exception of two, and that's Grand Chenier and West Fork, which both sustained extensive damage and remain closed to marine traffic. Primary power has been restored to Calcasieu, and crews are working to return it to full service. When it comes to traffic, there were 168 damaged signals that have been repaired, and although all signals are currently working in some capacity, traffic signal repairs are ongoing with statewide crews because of just how much damage was done across this region. At the height of the storm, there were 86 weather-related road closures. LA 82 roadway washout repairs have been completed, and the roadway has been reopened. There's ongoing clearing of ditches filled with silt in Cameron Parish. Calcasieu and Cameron still have significant amounts of debris on the roads. Some parts of Cameron and Calcasieu are reportedly still waiting on insurance adjusters to start recovery. And of course, we're pressing for that to happen just as soon as possible. We know that that should have already taken place. Of course, throughout all of this, and as I mentioned earlier, these are not the best of circumstances to be going through a hurricane response and recovery because of COVID-19. Today we reported 2,654 new cases on 35,192 tests. And sadly, we also reported 31 additional deaths from COVID-19, bringing our total to 8,621 since the start of the pandemic. Currently, there are 1,646 people hospitalized across the state with COVID-19, 217 of which are on mechanical ventilators. Now, suffice it to say that our baseline numbers right now are too high. Test positivity is too high, cases are too high, hospitalizations are too high, and deaths are too high. We need to do everything we can to bring those numbers down, especially given that we know that there are new variants in the United States and in the state of Louisiana. For example, the UK variant, which is more easily transmitted and so forth. And so let's all work together to do those things that are absolutely essential to make sure that transmission is reduced and hospitalization capacity is maintained. That means we have to mask, we have to social distance, we have to stay home when we're sick, wash our hands frequently, and we're adding a new thing to the list, and that is get vaccinated when you are able to get vaccinated. And this really is the good news, and it's a little bit slow in coming, but we have a way to put this pandemic behind us now, and that is by everybody being vaccinated. The two vaccines currently available, the Moderna and the Pfizer, are both two-dose vaccines. They are safe, they are effective, and only when enough people get vaccinated will we actually turn the corner and put this pandemic behind us. Yesterday, LDH announced that 324 vaccine providers would be operating this week in all 64 parishes. So there's 324 providers who will all receive vaccine this week. LDH has published the list of participating providers along with their locations and contact information on its website, and you can go to covidvaccine.la.gov in order to get that list, and that is how you schedule your appointments. So there is light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not there yet. And while the vaccine is not available for everybody, we simply don't have enough, there is a mask available for everybody. And the mask remains the most essential and powerful tool that we have at our disposal to protect our family, our loved ones, and our neighbors. And yes, ourselves, because it does confer a benefit on the wearer as well. So I'm going to wrap up by saying I know it's been an incredibly difficult year for everyone in our country, for everyone in our state, and certainly that is the case here in Southwest Louisiana and in Calcasieu Parish. I want to thank you for hanging in there. I want to thank all the local officials for your really good work. I want to thank you for being good neighbors to one another. And I want to thank everybody for their partnership, whether it's these non-governmental organizations, charities, and so forth, our private sector, the folks who work in local government, all of the state officials who are working so hard, and then also the folks from FEMA as well and our federal partners. And speaking of that, I'm going to be followed now by Tony Robinson, who is a regional administrator for FEMA Region 6, and he came out of Texas today in order to be here to meet with the local officials, and he's going to come up and share some thoughts with you all as well. But thank you so much, and I appreciate everybody. I look forward to coming back here every time that we can. Tony?
Thank you, Governor. I'll just be brief. I just want to commend the parish for, number one, recognizing that there is long-term recovery. We've made progress, but there's still a ways to go. So I want to commend the parish and the local leadership for taking the lead on this long-term recovery and implementing the National Disaster Recovery Framework. Governor, I want to thank you, Director Wascom. I think Louisiana kind of leads the nation in implementing the National Disaster Recovery Framework and looking on long-term recovery issues. Obviously, you have a lot of practice at it, but once again, really have stepped up and realized that it takes everybody working together in long-term recovery. So the citizens really have to be part of that, as well as our business communities, our local, state, and federal partners. So we want to be part of that. As the governor mentioned, the Stafford Act programs, our individual assistance, our public assistance, the Small Business Administration, our National Flood Insurance Program, we've provided over $1 billion in assistance for Hurricanes Laura and Delta. But there's still a way to go. We still have work to do, and we want to do that working with the state, local, and private sector partners. And so we've looked at a couple of priorities with the state, so looking at housing, broadband access, infrastructure resilience, economic stability, community well-being, education, and cultural impact as some of the areas where we'll bring in our federal partners to work with our state and local partners to see how we can address those long-term recovery issues there. We've already done some work in our housing task force, working with the Lake Charles Housing Authority, and also looking at community wellness, especially focusing on children and youth and the services that can be provided to them, focusing on education and food and nutrition. So I want to make our commitment that it's not only FEMA, but the federal partners who are part of our recovery support functions will be working closely with you all on this continuing effort. This time I'd like to bring up the Honorable Senator Ronnie Johns to make a few comments.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Governor, for your remarks. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On the afternoon of August the 27th, I climbed into a helicopter with Governor Edwards, and we left Baton Rouge, heading this way to see what kind of destruction that we were going to be faced with here in Southwest Louisiana. And I can tell you from the air, we could tell that there was just a tremendous amount of damage. But until I got home the very next morning and was actually being able to drive down a street or have any difficulty driving down the street because of trees and electrical lines, little did I realize just how much damage we were facing. But the governor made a commitment to us that afternoon here that our state would be here for us. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that this man and his administration has absolutely lived up to their word. I cannot think of one thing that our local delegation asked for that was legitimate that we did not get. And so my hat is off to GOSEP. Jim Wascom, thank you so much for your help and for being here for us. FEMA, Tony, thank you for everything that you guys have done and continue to do, and you're going to be a huge part of our recovery. To our local OEP, Dick Grumion, and your outstanding group, thank y'all there so much. I will tell you that our local delegation has really been involved in this recovery process as we went through special sessions after the hurricanes both hit. There were things that we were able to do in Baton Rouge to move money around, to move funds around, to make some of this recovery move a lot quicker than we had anticipated it to be. So thank you to the members of the delegation, Senator Abraham and Representative Tarver for being here today, and the rest of our delegation is spread out. Some are in Baton Rouge in meetings this afternoon. I will tell you, our local mayors, they got a baptism by fire. I can remember going over to Westlake and seeing exterior walls of their city hall missing, and Mayor Hardy in there working. I went to Mayor Hunter's office, and there was a mop bucket and a mop right in the middle of his office, and they were sitting there trying to get water out of his office while he was trying to work. And to go to Sulphur City Hall and see Mayor Danahay sleeping on a mattress in his office. Those are the kinds of dedications, ladies and gentlemen, that leadership is truly all about. To our police jury, Brian and the two Brians that are here today, thank y'all for your leadership on the parish level and helping guide us through this most challenging time. Our local law enforcement agencies did a phenomenal job. You didn't hear about looting anywhere. You didn't hear about problems. They did their job. They did it quietly. They did it in a very responsible way, and they did it in a safe way, and we greatly appreciate that. McNeese and Soella, we were incredibly worried about our two institutions of higher learning and the tremendous amount of damage there, but the leadership of Dr. Darrell Burkell and our Chancellor Neil Aspinwall has been nothing but phenomenal. And Governor, I want to tell you that our state really stepped up to the plate. Facility planning, headed up by a local guy, Mark Moses, who grew up in Sulphur, Louisiana, has been just tremendous in making some headway. I think out at McNeese we've got over $85 million of contracts already in the works and progress being made, and the same thing at Soella. So we're making our headway there. To our local media, I want to thank you for keeping our citizens informed. People scattered all over this country, getting on a computer every morning and seeing what KPLC had to say, or even our local radio stations. And so thank you all very much for your work. To see the tower over at KPLC down on the ground when I got here the next morning, say how these people are going to ever transmit, and how you did it, I have no idea. So probably some teenager figured it out somewhere. So, but thank y'all. There's some people in this room that are really the unsung heroes, and that's people like United Way, Denise Dorrell at United Way, and our community foundation with Sarah Judson, Care Help of Sulphur, our Salvation Army. These people just did an incredible job just on the ground the day after the storm and helping provide food and supplies for people. Our faith-based organizations, without them, there is no doubt that we would not be where we are today. We had people from all over this country come here and from churches around this country and organizations that could feed up to 10,000 meals a day, down to a couple at my local church in Sulphur who arrived in a family van with a barbecue pit stuck in the back. I don't know how he even got it back there, but that couple sat there for over a week and barbecued hamburgers and hot dogs for people in Sulphur. Those are the kinds of things that has made our recovery what it is. Lastly, to our utility companies, Entergy, Jeff Davis Electric, Borgard Electric, Cleco, AT&T. What a phenomenal job they did. Who would have ever dreamed we were going to have electricity back in our homes and our businesses so quick? But without their efforts, it just wouldn't have happened. But ladies and gentlemen, recovery is going to be steady. It may be slow, but it's going to be steady. And we are a resilient community. We work together. We play together. We come together, and that's what makes Southwest Louisiana so strong. So thank you, all of you, for being here today. Governor, once again, thank you for your incredible leadership, and thank you for everything that the great state of Louisiana has done for Southwest Louisiana. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Johns. Well spoken, and thank you for commending all of those agencies and organizations. It's literally countless numbers helping out. We'll now hear from a few of our local government officials, and we'll start with Calcasieu Parish Police Jury President Brian Abshire.
Well, Senator, I think you covered everyone. I don't have anybody left to thank. But I just wanted to say a few words and say thank you for coming and supporting our recovery efforts. There was never any doubt when we got back to Lake Charles 5 months ago that we had a lot of work to do. But the communities come together and work together to recover and rebuild. We still have a long way to go, but we're headed in the right direction. We're fortunate in Calcasieu Parish that we can all work together to achieve the success that we've gotten thus far. But we have to change and adapt. Sometimes we have to get used to a new normal. But like the Burton Coliseum complex is usually meant for entertainment, right now it's being used as a debris processing center and is also undergoing its own damage repairs. But from restaurants to heavy industry and everything in between, our community is doing everything that they can to recover. We support one another, and we will achieve long-term success. So I thank you for coming out and supporting the recovery efforts and the framework, and I look forward to working with all of you more in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. We'll next hear from Nick Hunter, Mayor of the City of Lake Charles, and he will be followed by Mayor Danahay from the City of Sulphur.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. A couple days after the storms, when we were still really in the thick of it, I remember those as very dark and scary moments. And my team that was immediately around me had given us some of the most pessimistic prognoses of what we could expect. And the most pessimistic scenarios outlined the potential for months without water to certain areas of the city. The most pessimistic possibilities included months without electricity, months before our schools, our colleges were able to be up and functioning. And it's really only till recently that I've been comfortable talking about that publicly, because those first initial possibilities were so dark and scary that I truly didn't want to mention them publicly until we had a better grasp of where we were. I am so proud that we avoided those worst case scenarios. And today, when someone asks, how is Lake Charles doing? How is Southwest Louisiana doing? It's a difficult question to answer. And I think you have to acknowledge both. You have to acknowledge that there's a lot of people that have picked their lives up and put the pieces back together, and they are rolling right now, and they are functioning, and life is getting along for them. There's a lot of other people that are still picking up the pieces. There's a lot of other people in this community that are still hurting, that are still in a lot of pain. People without homes, and people whose lives are not back together. I think we must acknowledge both. Immediately after the storms, of course, human safety and making sure that human lives were preserved, that was top priority. Eventually we got to a point where we could kind of pick our heads up and look at the entirety of the situation we're in. We weren't just in that battle anymore. We were now focusing on the war. And a couple things my office did, we reached out to other cities that had been through hurricanes over the last few years and requested meetings with mayors to hear what experience they had gone through. And we also scheduled meetings with all the major employers in Southwest Louisiana to hear from them. I'm happy to say that through conducting those meetings, first of all, we have not found one major employer who has said, we've had enough, we're out. Southwest Louisiana, this is too much. We haven't found one that has said that. Every one of them has committed either we're back to where we were before the storms or we're getting back there. And also, we have had hiccups along the way. We have made mistakes. I mean, let's be honest, to go through something like we went through, I can't even put into words what we went through. The historic nature, you're gonna make mistakes. But by and large, what I found in talking with other mayors through other cities around this country is this recovery has progressed with teamwork and with synergy, unlike other disasters. And when I talk with mayors from other cities, I get certainly pearls of wisdom, but the biggest response I get is, I can't believe that y'all are where you are right now, 4 and 5 months after what you went through. And they tell me stories about how it took them a year or so more to get to where we are today after 4 or 5 months. So absolutely there's room for improvement. Absolutely we wish that certain things were moving quicker than others. There have been some things that we've been frustrated about. By and large, there have been more things that have gone right with this recovery than things that have gone wrong. And every day that I wake up in the city of Lake Charles, I am more optimistic and more excited about successes than I am pessimistic and worried about failures. And I can tell you that's a big difference than the way I felt 5 months ago. And locals, both the city of Lake Charles, the parish, sheriff's office, local entities, and the state and the feds have worked well together. After the storm, we had a lot of national media that left. And I tell you, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because had we completely screwed up the recovery, had we been fighting with each other, had we been bickering, those cameras probably would have stayed because it would have been dramatic and it would have been the soap opera type of story that they typically like to have for national headlines. We didn't have that here because we worked well together. And when we're working with the governor, when we're working with our congressional delegation, when we're working with the White House, there is no conversation about political affiliation. There is no conversation about ideology. It's all about helping people. And how do we get people the help that they need the quickest? And I'm very honored to be a part of this team, and we would not have gotten to where we are today if it wasn't for the state of Louisiana being there when we needed them to be there. And they have been there when we needed them to be there. So I appreciate the teamwork, and I believe that we are well on our way to recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, I know how it is. When you get to the end of an agenda, you don't want to be that politician that stands up there forever. So I appreciate y'all. Thank you, and God bless. I'll invite Mayor Mike Danahay to come say a few words.
Thank you, Nick. Everyone, appreciate being here today. Little story, but day 2 after the storm, Senator Ronnie John showed up at my office, and he asked me, he said, was there anything you're in need of? And I said, well, certainly. I said, but at that time we were running a little lean on our fuel for our various vehicles and you know, recovery type machinery. So he picked up the phone right then, called our Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Strain, and come lo and behold, we had fuel. It was just that easy. We really appreciate of him doing that for us, and of course all our legislative delegation. I know they were working extremely hard through that whole process. I'd like to thank the governor just as well. He was there on probably day 2 or 3 after the word, and was there to help us in any way that we needed help. I'm excited about this program, and the being that I was honored in 2006 to be the president of the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury, and we were just coming off of Hurricane Rita. And there was nothing like this in place at that time. We actually sat down as local officials and came up with Vision Calcasieu, and it was a very aggressive program to try to bring our communities back as quick as we possibly could. There was some funding involved in it, and of course the funding on a local level is very almost like a drop in the bucket. So we became kind of creative in what we did, and we were able to bring our communities back much quicker. But having to be able to partner with our federal partners and our state partners and our local partners to be able to recover in a much quicker pace. And I do say that, and you know, Mayor Hunter, that we are coming a lot quicker than I feel like we did in 2006 after Hurricane Rita. But there's still that long-term recovery that we're going to need. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to be needed on the local level just as well. We're excited about working with our partners to do that. So thank y'all very much. With that, I'd like to recognize Mayor Bob Hardy, who's here. If he'd like to come up and say a few words. There he is. You good? Okay. All right. Thank y'all very much.
Bob, if you're sure you don't want to come up, that is a great beard you're sporting. Everybody could see it, but that's okay. We have one more speaker, and then we will have a period of question and answer. And our last speaker today represents the community members and organizations who will be involved in the process that I guess are more non-governmental. He is the director of the Lake Area Industry Alliance. He also serves on several boards locally, including the Southwest Louisiana Community Foundation. And he's going to actually be the lead for our economic recovery support function. I would ask everybody to welcome Jim Rock.
Well, thank you, Brian, and good afternoon, everyone. You know, one thing about being the last person on the agenda, you could just get up here and say ditto, because I think most people have already been recognized and a lot of things have already been said, but I think I have a few unique comments here, so I'll try to make those. It is really an incredible honor to be here today and be part of this effort as we transition, like many have already said, from a situation of response mode to one of restoring, recovering, and redeveloping and revitalizing our community after the devastating storms that we saw last year. You know, back in 2005, we had the experience of Hurricane Rita. I know we learned a lot about hurricanes and hurricane damage and devastation in Rita. I know I did personally, but these two storms that we had last year in August and October taught us a lot of new lessons. And it would be imperative for us to use the lessons that we learned last year to rebuild a more resilient and sustainable community, because unfortunately we probably have not seen our last hurricane. That's KPLC has told me that. We also find ourselves not only with an opportunity to rebuild and create a resilient community, but also build one that improves the quality of life for all the citizens in the community. And that's something that everybody expects and something they deserve. So we don't want to just go back and build the same thing. We want to build better. And again, our community deserves that. We're going to use strong leadership, engagement of all sectors of the community, and a proven process to deliver results that will serve not only our current residents and current population, but also our children, our grandchildren, and future generations. Our recovery support functions, which Brian's already covered, are going to address not only the economic, with myself and others working on that, and housing needs, which is so critical right now, but also address health and social services, create a stronger infrastructure, address natural and cultural resources, and develop a long-range community plan. We want to create an environment where families are going to want to come here, live here, work here, and raise their families. And in closing, I was asked to point out a couple of agencies and groups that are here with us today. First, of course, since I have the microphone, I'm going to mention Lake Area Industry Alliance, but also police jurymen like Mr. Abshire there, municipalities, Dr. Kavanaugh with the Office of Public Health, who does a great job, George Swift with the Alliance, Sarah Judson with Community Foundation, Denise Durrell with United Way, Family and Youth Counseling, West Calcam Hospital, and CVB. So I want to end by thanking everybody that's here, because if you're in this auditorium today, you are part of the solution. And right after Brian says some closing remarks and we answer questions with some responses, we'll get to work. So I look forward to that, and thank you very much.
We appreciate your leadership, Jim, in this, and there's a lot of community members spending their time helping with this long-term effort. A little bit of housekeeping before we get into the Q&A part. One, I neglected earlier, I apologize, I didn't mention a few jurors we have with us today. Police jurors Eddie Lewis, Mike Smith, and Tony Gilry, in addition to President Abshire. Also, I want to mention that folks who want to learn more about it, what exactly are we talking about? There's a whole lot of information here on our website at Parish. It's called the Hurricanes Laura and Delta Recovery Framework. If you just go to calcasieuParish.gov/recovery. It's very easy to find. Once you get on our website, it's all there in great detail. And we will emphasize strongly the communications aspect all along the way. This is a 6 to 9 month plus process, and we want to make sure we communicate with the public and through the state and federal government as well. I also want to mention, in this effort, you have to have somebody to lead all this, and I have appointed Alberto Galan to my office. I'm very proud of him. He has hit the ground running, as they say, and it's going to take a lot of coordination, but somebody's got to be the head of that, and I appreciate all his work in that effort. So at this time, I know we've got a lot of speakers, and I don't know the nature of the questions, so nobody go for the exits, but at this point, we will open the floor for any questions from the media representatives present. Yes.
One of the most frequently asked questions is, what, if anything, can be done, what, if anything, the government can do to get the insurance companies to pay the claims? I think that's probably the number one roadblock for people who are trying to move forward. It's been 5 months and many people have not yet received enough to rebuild. What can be done to help them?
Thank you, Teresa. I'll summarize the question. It is what can be done to help folks who are struggling with their insurance claims with the insurance companies, I assume you mean, which we're very aware of. I think there's a litany of examples of that, and each case is different. I think, though, just from we've asked those questions well, and our best advice to that is to submit any direct complaints, questions, comments straight to the Commissioner of Insurance, Jim Donlan, his office at the state. They regulate these agencies. I know there are limits, but they are the ones that have to answer those questions. And they're very aware of these problems, and that would be our suggestion, to get information to at least help those people that are contacting you.
Do you have a number on how many people have left and don't plan to come back? And if you do have a number, how concerned are you about those who just said, I can't deal with this anymore, I'm out of here?
No, we don't have a number of, the question was, do we have a number of people who have left and not come back? That, we simply don't know that. We have a lot of information, as Mayor Hunter pointed out, that a lot have come back, and the ones who haven't, it's typically because of, obviously, the inability to have a place to live. So there's no numbers we can give. I will say, as a general rule, we have a lot of renters in Calcasieu Parish. Out of that group, I have no numbers, but there are cases where those folks are a little more prone to maybe moving away more permanently, simply because they have to find work and they didn't have a permanent home. That doesn't mean they're all gone. We do see a lot of the rental properties being repaired, but it's just a matter of hanging in there. On the home ownership, and I want to thank FEMA for their help, the quicker we can get temporary help for those folks, they can repair, and the focus is to try to get them quickly repaired and make their residences livable, even if it's not perfect. Although I don't I don't believe in guessing. I have a pretty strong hunch that the vast majority of folks will return. I really do. We are still, roughly speaking, not that far out from those storms. And this area has a lot of attachment to folks and families. So we haven't heard of a mass exit, if you will, of people not coming back. That would be my answer.
Those who are getting a late start on trying to rebuild, if there will be accommodations as far as debris pickup, because if the debris doesn't get outside until 5, 6, 7 months down the road because the insurance isn't paying, will the debris pickup continue?
Okay, on the debris issue, the hurricane debris from Hurricanes Laura and Delta. Question is about, some people may just be getting to their repairs. It's important to understand that each municipality has their own plan. The parish has its own. Now, we all happen to use the same contractor, but they have their own deadlines. And you probably have seen some of the smaller municipalities especially have already indicated they're wrapping it up. Please get it out there. And they're going to give you a deadline. So that's the answer. We are far enough along where I know from the parish's side, we'll be making an announcement probably within the next couple of weeks about our timeline. But it is getting to the point where we have to start wrapping that up. The state and the federal government has been very helpful in that, but we are getting closer. So I think people still have time, but it's important to get your debris out there that's eligible to the roadside as quickly as possible, but there's still time left, and I know if you want to talk to any of the mayors afterwards, you're going to have to get their particular instance from them.
After Hurricane Rita, we had the Road Home program and the Louisiana Recovery Authority. Will there be anything like that coming to help citizens?
So the long-term recovery plan, that's actually, I don't know yet. The answer is yes, but in what form? That's one of the key parts of this long-term recovery we've covered today, whether it be in the housing area, for just a couple of examples. You have some homes that will be eligible for what's called hazard mitigation grants. We have actually state representatives here today who are over all of that, if you wish to ask more. And if there can be some matching of different sources of federal funds, you could have those elevations paid for somebody who is in a flood hazard area, for example. You also have other what's called CDBG monies, community development block grant monies available for possible repairs and so forth. But it's too early, Teresa, to have those answers, but we are absolutely pursuing those. And I'd rather defer to the governor or his staff or FEMA and their representatives if there's more specifics that could answer you a little better, if you choose.
Thank you, Brian. And Teresa, the answer is we are making the request of the federal government for the funding necessary to have the program that you referenced. That's part of the community development block grant funding request we made previously to the Trump administration. We've now renewed that with the Biden administration, and we're hoping for a disaster supplemental appropriation sometime no later than this spring that would allow us to undertake many of the things that Brian was just talking about, whether it's housing, hazard mitigation, you name it, including the funding necessary so that local government can use it to satisfy their non-federal match obligation. Now, so I'd like to be able to say absolutely yes, but until there's an appropriation from Congress, it's premature to say that. I feel very confident that we will get it because the president has told me he understands what the needs are and he's going to be helpful. We have a former Louisiana congressman working in the White House right now, and every time he speaks about what the priorities are, he mentions Louisiana's hurricane recovery efforts, and we've had a really good help out of our congressional delegation, and I've had the opportunity to speak to House and Senate leaders who are not part of our delegation, and they tell me they're going to be helpful too, but they haven't yet appropriated the funding, and until they do, it's premature to say yes, absolutely for a fact. I have to excuse myself. We've got a call at 2 o'clock with the White House and the CDC and Operation Warp Speed about COVID and specifically about vaccine and the vaccination program. So I'm going to have to excuse myself to go get on that call. Otherwise, the other governors will be trying to get our allocation of vaccine or something like that. We're not going to let that happen. But Brian, I thank you very much for everything, not that you've organized today, although this is great, but for all of the work that's being done by you and all the other local officials. And my commitment is the state of Louisiana will be a tremendous partner to you all, and we're going to work with the federal government as well to deliver the recovery as best we can, as quickly as we can, and to marshal all the resources necessary to make that happen. And I too want to thank everybody in the state who was impacted by the hurricane, but here we are in Southwest Louisiana where more people were impacted than anywhere else and impacted twice. And the faith community has just been tremendous. They're always the fastest to respond, and so we thank them very much. And I do encourage everybody to be mindful that as we continue to recover from these hurricanes, we're doing it in a COVID environment. So please make sure that you're following all the mitigation measures. And I'm going to excuse myself now, Brian. Thank you.
Sure. We want to thank the governor for coming today. It's been very helpful. He had several meetings before this, and I know we've said it a lot, but it's very important. Our state partners and federal partners are critical in this. Go ahead, Teresa.
Well, there is a viewer question, and I have not had an opportunity to verify the authenticity of it, but the viewer is saying, why is it taking so long for the FEMA campers to get people in need, saying that there is a family that has a set of newborn twins and they're living in a tent. So I just thought perhaps you could address that.
That may be the question. That is getting people set up in temporary housing after the storm. And it is a multi-tiered answer that I'm not going to try to answer. I'll summarize. Each case is different. FEMA deals directly with each of the applicants for that, and they go by who has filed applications with FEMA for any type of assistance. And so the answer isn't the same for everybody. Some of it is the steps required on FEMA's end. Some of it depends on the information provided by that citizen or family member. And so it's too much of a generalization to say that. There are a lot of mobile homes and trailers that have been set, but that's more of a, on the specifics from FEMA, I hesitate to answer unless you know the specifics of that case. And FEMA, if a FEMA representative wants to give a better answer than that, they may have had to exit as well, but I'd rather them deal with that question. I just know from meeting prior to this press briefing, we met with Region 6 Administrator Robinson from FEMA, the leader of the Louisiana area for FEMA, local folks here from FEMA, the governor, head of GOSEP, the Emergency Management Office, and we had deep discussions on that exact issue. All parties are really trying to work hard to speed that up, and I just want people to know that. Any other questions? It means a lot that everybody came out today. We hope it gets out in the public a lot. Again, one more reminder, any information on a long-term recovery plan can be found at calcasieuParish.gov/recovery on the internet, and we will be communicating regularly, and we look forward to reaching out to the public soon. Thank you.